The sky above the Peruvian Amazon turns violent without warning. Dark clouds roll in like walls of iron, swallowing the afternoon light whole. Lightning carves through the air, and from somewhere far above the green canopy, a young woman finds herself no longer inside an airplane. She is falling. She cannot hear the engines. She cannot hear screaming. All she can hear is the quiet rush of wind as the jungle rises toward her at unimaginable speed. She is still strapped to her seat. If this is the kind of true story that stops you cold, you are in the right place. Subscribe and stay with us, because what this young woman endured over the 11 days that followed is even harder to believe than the fall itself. Juliane Kopke was not an ordinary teenager, and the life she lived before that Christmas Eve matters deeply to understanding how she survived it. She was born on October 10, 1954, in Lima, Peru, the only child of two German zoologists, Hans Wilhelm Kepke and Maria Kepke. Her parents had left Germany to pursue their passion for wildlife research in one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. They worked at Lima's Museum of Natural History, while Juliane was small, but when she was 14 years old, the family made a decision that would quietly shape the rest of her life. They left the city behind and moved deep into the Amazon rainforest to establish a biological research station they called Panguana, nestled in a remote stretch of the Peruvian jungle near the town of Puerto Inca. For the next few years, Juliane's classroom was the rainforest itself. Her mother taught her about birds and plants. Her father taught her how to read rivers, how to move through dense vegetation, how to treat wounds, and which animals and insects to avoid. She learned that moving water in the jungle almost always leads somewhere, that smaller streams feed into larger ones, and larger ones eventually reach people. She absorbed these lessons not from books but from the jungle floor, from daily walks with her parents through the humid tangle of the Amazon basin. Authorities eventually required her to return to Lima to complete her formal schooling at the German school there. But those years at Panguana had already shaped something in her that no classroom could replicate. On December 23, 1971, Juliane graduated from high school in Lima. It was a celebration. She and her mother Maria attended the graduation ceremony together, and that night they made plans to fly back to the research station the next morning to meet Hans Wilhelm for Christmas. Her father had warned them before about flying with LANSA, the Líneas Aéreas Nacionales Sociedad Anónima airline. Its reputation was poor. But with other flights canceled and the holiday pressing, Juliane and her mother booked seats aboard LANSA Flight 508, scheduled to depart Lima and stop at Pucallpa before continuing on to Iquitos. The airport on Christmas Eve was packed. Flights from the previous day had been canceled, leaving hundreds of passengers rerouting through whatever seats remained. By the time Juliane and her mother found their places aboard the Lockheed L-188A Electra turboprop aircraft, the cabin held 92 people in total, including the crew. Juliane and Maria sat together. Juliane had a window seat. The flight lifted off from Lima's Jorge Chávez International Airport shortly before noon. The route to Pucallpa was roughly an hour long. Weather reports had indicated a powerful thunderstorm along the path, and those warnings had been passed along to the pilots. The decision was made to continue as planned. Roughly 25 minutes into the flight, the aircraft entered the storm. Juliane later described what she saw: the skies darkening, lightning flickering around the wings, other passengers beginning to weep and call out. She and her mother reached for each other and held hands. Then Juliane saw a bright flash of light on the left outer engine. Her mother looked at her and said quietly, calmly, as if she had accepted what was coming, "That is the end. It's all over." Those were the last words Juliane would ever hear from her. The lightning strike caused the plane to enter a nosedive. The fuselage began to break apart in the air at around 21,000 feet. Within moments, Juliane found herself no longer inside the aircraft. She was outside it, still strapped firmly into her seat, spinning through open sky above the Amazon rainforest. She later said the sensation was like being in a tumble dryer, that there was greenness below her, and that she felt strangely peaceful as she fell. Then she lost consciousness. She fell approximately 10,000 feet, still buckled to the seat, before the thick jungle canopy below slowed her descent. Scientists and aviation experts have since theorized that the dense, layered vegetation of the rainforest acted like a cushion, absorbing the impact across multiple levels of branches and foliage rather than delivering it all at once. The seat itself, now functioning as a kind of makeshift sled, may have helped distribute the forces of landing through the forest floor. None of it makes complete physical sense. It remains, by any reasonable standard, extraordinary. Julianne regained consciousness on the ground on December 25 Christmas morning. She was in the jungle. She had a broken collarbone. Her right arm carried a deep gash that had already begun to swell. She had torn ligaments in her left knee. Her right eye was swollen partially shut, and her left was swollen completely closed. She had lost her glasses, and without them, she could see only a few feet clearly. She had lost one shoe. She was wearing a sleeveless sundress that offered no protection from the insects, the rain, or the thorns. She called out for her mother. There was no answer. There was nothing but the sound of the jungle settling around her, rain dripping through the canopy far above, and the noise of insects beginning their work on the wreckage scattered across the forest floor. Julianne did not panic. She would say later that she did not allow herself to panic. Her father's lessons came back to her with quiet clarity. She looked for moving water. She found a small stream not far from where she had landed, and she began to follow it. Her father had told her, always follow the water downstream. It will grow. It will lead somewhere. In the first days, she moved through the wreckage of the crash. She found 3 seats from the plane still bound together, with passengers still strapped in, clearly dead. She checked the faces carefully, looking for her mother. Maria was not among them. She found a small bag of sweets in the debris, and she took them. That bag of candy would be the only food she ate for the next 11 days. The jungle pressed in around her constantly. The rainy season was underway, which meant the ground was wet, fruit was scarce, and the insects were relentless. Ants, mosquitoes, beetles, and flies fed on her wounds and her exposed skin around the clock. She moved as steadily as she could, often wading through streams where the water rose to her chest, staying in the water when possible because it helped with the heat and kept some insects at bay. She could hear rescue planes occasionally in the distance, flying search patterns somewhere above the impenetrable canopy. She could not signal them. The trees were too thick. She was invisible from the air. By the 4th day, her watch stopped working. She had no way to track time beyond the rhythm of light through the canopy. She kept walking. The small stream was growing just as her father said it would. It joined with other streams and became a river she could wade alongside, and then a wider river she could float in when her legs gave out. She drifted and walked. She walked and drifted. By around the 9th day, she could see and feel that something was wrong with her right arm beyond the original cut. There was movement beneath the skin. Maggots had taken hold in the wound, burrowing into the damaged tissue. She later said that she counted the sensation rather than recoiling from it, and that something her father had once shown her came to mind. He had treated the family dog for a similar infestation using diesel fuel, which caused the maggots to surface so they could be removed. She filed that memory away and kept walking. On the 10th day, nearly starved, barely able to stand, her vision blurring from dehydration and injury, Julianne saw something through the trees that she initially believed was a hallucination. A small boat sat at the bank of the river. A narrow trail led upward from the water to a small wooden shelter. She dragged herself toward the boat, found fuel in the motor's tank, and applied it directly to the wound in her arm. The maggots came writhing to the surface. She removed them one by one, 35 in all. She climbed the trail to the hut, which took her several hours despite the short distance. No one was inside. She fell into what sleep she could find and waited. She woke on January 3, 1972, her 11th day in the jungle, still alone. She had been unable to bring herself to take the boat, which she said was not hers. Then she heard voices. 3 fishermen had returned to the shelter and found a pale, emaciated, maggot-treated, barely clothed teenage girl sitting in the dark of their hut. Some accounts describe how the men were initially frightened, uncertain of what they were seeing, with local legend describing a water goddess that appeared as a blonde, pale-skinned woman near rivers. Julianne spoke to them in Spanish. She told them she had been on a plane. She told them she had survived a crash. They listened. They fed her. They treated her wounds with what they had. The next morning, they put her in their canoe and began the journey to the nearest village. From there, Juliana Kepke was airlifted to a hospital in Pucallpa. Her father, Hans Wilhelm, arrived to find his daughter alive. He also learned what she had not been told by the fishermen: she was the only survivor. All 91 other people aboard Lanza Flight 508, including her mother Maria, had not made it out. Some had survived the crash itself, but were unable to travel through the jungle to find help. They were found days later by search teams too late. Julianne helped those same teams locate the crash site once she recovered. Her mother's body was recovered several days afterward. The world reacted with something between disbelief and awe. Julian's survival was covered in newspapers across multiple continents. The crash was later recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records as the deadliest lightning-related disaster in aviation history, with 91 fatalities directly attributed to the in-flight lightning strike. Julian went on to do exactly what she had always planned. She moved to Germany, earned her doctorate in biology, and built a career as a scientist specializing in mammalogy, working for years as deputy director of the Bavarian State Collection of Zoology in Munich. She married a fellow scientist and she returned to Panguana. She returned to the exact place where her parents had built their research station, the place where she had learned to follow streams and read rivers and move through the jungle without fear. Her father passed away in 2000 and she took over the station. She has continued managing and expanding it, working to have it formally protected as a biosphere reserve, honoring the decades of work her parents gave their lives to. In 1998, filmmaker Werner Herzog traveled with Julian to the crash site for a documentary called Wings of Hope. Herzog had a personal reason for caring. He had been scheduled to board LANSA Flight 508 himself that Christmas Eve, scouting locations for his film Aguirre, The Wrath of God, but a last-minute change of plans had put him on a different departure. The two of them stood together in the jungle where the wreckage still lay, returning to the place where 91 people died, and one 17-year-old girl had somehow walked away. In 2011, Julian published a memoir titled When I Fell from the Sky, telling the full story in her own words for the first time. What remains after all of it, after the fall and the fever and the 11 days and the rescue and the decades of science and conservation, is not a story of luck alone, though luck was undeniably present. It is also a story of a girl whose parents had quietly given her everything she needed without knowing they were doing it. Every lesson learned barefoot in the forest at Panguana, every river followed, every survival principle her father casually passed on while treating a dog or identifying a species, all of it was waiting inside her when the sky gave way on Christmas Eve. There are things about her survival that cannot be fully explained. The fall itself, the physics of a human being descending 2 miles through open air and landing alive, still generates genuine scientific curiosity. And there is something else that sits at the edge of the story. Julian, by her own account, never lost the feeling that she would find a way out. She was afraid, certainly. She was in pain, certainly. But somewhere beneath the fear was something steady that kept her moving downstream. She returned to the jungle that tried to take her life and made it her life's work instead. What do you think kept her going when almost nothing else could have? Leave your thoughts below, because on a question like this one, every answer feels a little different.